Hi, Kevin. Hi, Joe.
Hello, Julian and Joe.
Yeah. So what's this
Yeah.
location? This is like a special location you're in, both of you, actually, aren't you?
I'm in a different part of my house right now. Uh,
Got it.
yeah,
Joe, the
the office
architect,
is
I'm in
always.
you're at the
the
office.
office. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
We're in a
And Joe,
shared WeWorking
Mhm.
type space
and
downtown.
Joe, have you lost some weight? Is that possible? I feel like you're
Trying,
leaned out.
trying.
Yeah,
That's
it's working.
great. Good.
Yeah.
Like paying back
Congratulations.
taxes, digging out of the hole.
Yeah.
Losing weight's like paying back taxes. I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah.
The we were talking on the WhatsApp this week, and I thought it would be helpful to direct the conversation. Lots of people are going through a lot of different things, and I don't know about y'all, but I get calls in addition to the coaching calls that I do. I get calls from entrepreneurs several times a week, being like, "My company is screwed," or "I'm in this horrible situation. What do I do?" And for those of you that have been listening to this podcast here and there, it actually started as a CEO kind of support group or CEO peer group where we pulled in some people that were all repeat entrepreneurs because that repeatability is so important. I was wondering, just sort of as an open question, how did you guys create your networks, and how did you have you made sure that you had appropriate support starting your businesses or while you were building them?
I didn't
I
know how critical it would be to start. And it was funny. Early Klout days, we rented space in the same building as Twitter, and we ended up with way more space than I can handle. So I subletted to 4 other companies. So I had
Mm.
4 other CEOs just, in the same space as me in those early days. And those became the people, you could see the beat down we were all taking and, the walks we would take and the conversations we would have. Luckily figured out early how critical it was be. And I lucked into having people around.
Mm.
And it's been critical since then, but it's almost every CEO I feel like I meet, you can make that connection pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like that? Like when you meet a CEO, a venture backed CEO, are you just like, we're, you know, I can feel your pain even without hearing it?
I was
if
I was at a dinner last week, and it was a VC dinner, one of the first ones I'd been to in a really long time. And there's like some LPs, like investors of investors, and some GPs, and then some entrepreneurs, right? And I was sitting next to this woman who had been running a company and it was bootstrapped, and we were kind of like talking. And I feel like I resonated on a level I haven't resonated in a long time, where she was like, "Yeah, I was 15 people, and then I brought it down to 7." And my first
Yep.
instinct is I said, "Good for you," which is, and because it's not good news, but there
no,
was a sort of mutual understanding, right? So yeah, you kind of, you vibe almost immediately when someone runs a software company or a venture back one. Kevin?
Yeah.
yeah, I think that I definitely do connect with the people that are open and like no bullshit. There definitely are people like and my approach has always been to like when I first got to San Francisco, I would just go to I didn't know anybody, and I would
Mhm.
just go to every single startup event and like try to just like put myself out there, and just try to like just luck would make some of my strongest connections. But I find like now there are certain people who are like super open. Like if you meet me, I'll tell you like
Yeah.
everything, and I'll be
Mhm.
super open. And you'll get some other people like that who are the people that I definitely do connect with the most when you first meet them. But there's also other people that are just like they make it seem it's like uh you're an investor for some reason, like they're like, yeah, everything's going great and like blah blah blah, and you know that it's total bullshit. And
Yeah.
those are the people I'm like, I know I'm not going to be able to connect with them, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to like follow up. But I think with me building my network, like to Joe's point, I totally agree. I didn't realize, and these podcasts weren't around back then. Like we're really hammering home like how important a network really truly is. So I would just try to meet people and that would help. But there was no like grand plan to like building a network and all of this. But it was just like one person after another. And I'm like an extrovert, so it just kind of happens naturally to me. And I'm very curious about other people's like businesses and how they got there. So just kind of like rolled with it. But like, I think looking back at it, like building a network is one of the most important things you could do. And this is not like a company specific thing. This is like a career long endeavor. No matter what, if you do change industries or whatever, building your network, those are the people that you can like Julian, like you just today, you gave me a great referral to some, I'm in a tough spot right now with my company on something that we need. And you gave me a great referral and I actually may work with this person. And like, that's what like a great network could be. And also like investor networks, like building that over many years, like that's really great. But I think there's a ton of like luck involved, but also follow up. I think that's where a lot of people screw it up. It's like, I'm always the person checking in on the people. How you doing? What's happening? What's the latest? Let's get together. Like, and I find that a lot of people on the other end, they're not doing that with me. And I just see like they have a very small network, or maybe I'm just unlikable for some reason and they don't want to include
I
me.
would have told you by now. There's the A game for me of the person who does this is Sam Korkos at Levels. Sam Korkos. So first of all, if you want his investor updates, to be clear, I'm not an investor in his company, although I suppose I could have been. He is just, you're like, yeah, I'll send them to you. He sends them, it's got to be like 5,000 people or something by this point.
No way. Holy shit.
He is incredible follow through, incredible. So I was on his podcast, I want to say a month and a half ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And his EA asks me for my address and sends me flowers to my house from an expensive florist up the way. And it's like, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm sure our audience will really love blah, blah, blah. Like, and I'm talking, it's really serious follow through.
Yeah.
And that is, man, you know, I got to say, like, even just now when you were saying, I have a problem with my company, I feel the need to follow up here and say, no, but Kevin doesn't have a problem with his company. To be clear, he needed finance resources. Nothing wrong with this company.
Right. Well, the company's doing great.
But that's like, I have a natural tendency to make things positive and to try and make them nice and friendly and so on. Sam is the opposite. That openness gets everyone to believe in him, you know?
Right.
And that's his means to do it. Joe, looked like you had something to think about. You were talking about.
No, I mean, pardon me. The follow-up is too rare or isn't great when it only comes in those points of need if you're not kind of nurturing those relationships.
Yes.
I have a group here in LA, 9 of us, 9 CEOs, and we meet once a month. It's the last Tuesday of the month.
Yeah.
We meet for a couple hours and then we do dinner. And
that's great. That's great.
This group has been going I've been in it for 7 years.
Wow.
And like almost never missed a month. But there's people who have been in it, one of the newer people.
Wow.
And it's great because we have a familiarity with each other's business and just, you know, blind spots and everything else that like when the need comes, you really can support each other.
Right.
Like I feel like almost anyone in that group could come in and run my business if I was like commissioned for a month. Because they just have that context to know how I like to do things. You know, that's rare to get to that level, but
for sure,
I feel like that's a good goal to like have a group that you're that close to.
Yeah. Now, how did you build that? Like that, like, and also like you've been in this business for a long time. Like this is not something that happens overnight. You need to really take the time to build it. But how did that like group come together?
It's a crazy story. I guess the group has been around for actually more than 20 years. There's no person that has been in that long, but it's the same kind of, there's a lineage. And the key that has made it work, I believe, is there's like a commitment that like we are not going to miss. Like you only are missing if it's like, something real is happening. It's not just like,
Got it.
oh guys, hey, I'm sorry, I'm busy, whatever. It's
Right.
like, hey, if the last Tuesday of the month, block it on your calendar.
Hmm.
If something real comes up, but like people generally don't miss it.
Right.
And it's that everyone taking it the same level of serious, I think has
Sure.
a massive impact.
What
Is it
Go
like
ahead.
is it like one of those like YPO groups or whatever?
See, I'm not in YPO, but there is one or two people in the group that are in YPO and they say it's similar. There's pluses and minuses on each. I think there's
Mhm.
probably a lot of similarities, but it's, we just did it ourselves.
Right.
The first group that I ever did this with, back in the day when I really didn't know anyone, I didn't know how to do public speaking. I didn't know how to, and I was forced to do a talk because I was going to a podcast conference, and I joined Toastmasters, and it seems like it's like such a generic, like kind of Tony Robbins-ish thing to do, but I did, and I didn't know how to do public speaking, and it was the first real network of kind of entrepreneurs, or definitely people that were business oriented, that I ever joined. And even now I keep in touch with some of them, and I really did learn how to do public speaking through Toastmasters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like almost all the skills that I think that I've learned, very seldom have I learned it from a book. Very
Right.
seldom have I learned it from a course. I think I'm a decent self-learner, but it's really when speaking verbally with somebody about something that I think I thrive. Right. And so that's probably how it happens. So today, and especially in Canada, it's ironic because in Canada, I almost see nobody in person. I was at this dinner, like I said, and people were like, "Oh my God, Julie!" Like it was so unusual for
You're
them.
a real person.
Yeah, exactly. And but it's I don't know. It's crazy because we're all suffering. I feel like when I say suffering, what I mean is we're all going through hard things, but you seem to have the biggest structure, Joe, of this really important thing, but I don't think that sounds like a 1% thing. Not that you're special, but like almost nobody structures it that way.
Yeah, I have not, other than like a YPO thing, I've not met many people that have a structure, and
Mhm.
it's been huge for me. If you could, I highly recommend if you could find that group,
Yep.
5, 6, 8 people, 10 people, whatever, and make it a real thing. It's like, I don't know that I could have made it through, effectively winding down Joymode without that support.
Sure.
Wow.
How did you find them in Los Angeles? Because like it's not they're all venture backed or no?
Yeah, everyone's venture backed. Big,
Wow.
Multiple 100 million plus revenue companies. Like
Wow.
we're just starting. We're the smallest company in the group, but I've been in it through Joymode. Going
Mhm.
raising
Right.
$25 million, whatever, to
Mhm.
kind of soft landing acquisition and shutdown to
Yeah.
starting a whole new thing. And it's cool. And multiple people have had multiple companies and acquisitions, and you kind of see the whole life trajectory and how all the pieces fit together, and gives a really deep perspective on when somebody's having, when somebody's like, oh, I'm having trouble with my board or my co-founder.
Right.
You can bring all that history to like, hey, I've seen this with you before.
It's so important. Yeah.
Versus like,
Mhm.
hey, but 2 years ago when we last had drinks, those
Mhm.
those casual relationships are good, but I think like formalizing it,
Yep.
is paid off huge for me.
It
So
reminds me of a time when I did this in person, and it's actually Greg Eisenberg back in the day that got them together. It was like I don't know how to, he's an entrepreneur, but he's like a famous Twitter personality now. And there were 5 or 6 different entrepreneurs, and we all got together. We rented an Airbnb, a house in Los Angeles, and it was like 3 days. So basically a retreat, right? And it was the very beginning of when I started Breather, and I was still ideating it. Rob turned out to start a company, vidIQ, that is basically like an SEO for YouTube business. It's like 10 million ARR now. Greg went on to start and sell like a couple of companies, and was one of the founders of Hootsuite. And so we're talking like a pretty legit group, just sitting together and committing to like 3 days to do it. And it's funny because it created like a WhatsApp group type of thing
Right.
afterwards. And we're still like chatting now here and there. So even that 2 or 3 days of intense kind of like ability to do it, it's got to be in a warm place. You don't want to be together. You could do it in a cottage, I guess, on a ski mountain or ski hill or something. But, you give people an opportunity. It's like, there are people, I know Sam Parr and some other people are creating CEO peer groups as a business right now.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Right. And
Who's doing
so
that?
that's interesting. Yeah. I don't forget the name of it. Kevin, do you know?
Yeah, it's called Hamptons, and Sam Parr and who's his partner he's doing it with? I can't remember who else it was, but yeah, they're trying to create, I guess, like a similar thing as like YPO. It's just that I think I'm not sure if it's totally similar stage, but it's around founders getting together. Now, I do believe that they do charge for it.
It's like 5K. I think it's 5K a year or something.
Yeah, it's something like that. So yeah, I definitely would consider something like that if I didn't already have something. So I actually created like a group like this myself when I was, it was probably when right after I raised my Series A at Shyp. So it was like 5 entrepreneurs. We all had the same lead investor.
Okay.
And so we had that in common. And then it wasn't formalized or anything, but I would just like force people to get for dinner like once a month or once every 2 months. And it was great. And it was in person. And this was in the heyday of San Francisco. And it was just like all awesome restaurants and all this. And it was really good, especially as like a first time like real venture founder. And we were all at similar stages. I don't think anybody had any other previous venture experience, but you're just going through all the same sort of things together. And you're like, oh no, I had this problem. It's just so important. And just like, if you don't have that network, you even just to like commiserate with, and also if you're going through a problem, sometimes you get stuck in your head and you're like, especially if you're a first time entrepreneur, it's like, this one person is like either demanding so much more money, which is like crazy, and I'm not going to keep them, or like, oh, my VP, whoever just left, my company is going to like fail. Yeah. If you have that other person there, it's like, this is not a big deal. Like you're going to like, I've done this, and then you just have that, you could commiserate together, but also like you have some other experience on there. So I really like the idea, and Julian, you were the one that formed this group. You're like, let's get second time founders together. Let's let people that have like a certain level of the same sort of experience and are going through similar types of problems together. And I also do believe it has to be people who like genuinely like each other. That was another thing. Like I like handpick the people that I was like, and we were also like friends as well. So I think it'd be a number of different things. I think you could have like the friend sort of thing. That I also have other people that I've now been friends with over a decade in the Bay Area, and they now are, our kids are friends and stuff like that. But we'll get together like more frequently and all of that. But you could have like the friend relationships that are also like professional, that are at a similar stage. You could have like the groups that Joe is talking about that are maybe more formalized, but like non-pain. And then you could probably also have like the YPO, the Hamptons, that are like, they will construct these groups, and maybe not like the one thing so I've never been a part of those groups. The one thing I worry about there is just, am I going to like the people that are going to be there? Are they going to like force me into this? Am I going to really trust these people to share like the most intimate pieces of, I know that's obviously an unwritten rule, or a written rule. You can't share anything about anybody else, but I like when it's naturally formed. But it is really hard to get people to commit to other things. I found that I've found people that I'm like, man, we should get together a lot. Like, we have so much in common. We both learn, and it's just like, you have to make all the effort, and then there's no reciprocation. I think Joe, you mentioned like, it can't just be the times that like you just reach out and need something. It needs to be like an ongoing relationship that you're there and you're just shooting the shit, and just like, something comes up or something like that. I think those, for me, I prefer the ones that are more like naturally formed versus like the
I will
forced.
say it, and if you find yourself, your career in entrepreneurship, by the way, doesn't end with a company, right? I think that's
Right.
understood by everybody here.
Yes.
So, and to Joe's example, I was going to say to Joy's example, because your company was Joymode. To Joe's example, his last company, Joymode, it gets shut down. Then at the next company, those people are still there. And so in the first company in the first venture-backed company, Breather, that I ran, I didn't know any, that's actually false because Gary V was one of my first investors. So I guess I did know cool people, but I didn't know cool entrepreneurs. Right. It's like, I didn't know like the Dave Morans of the world and like these other kind of cool Silicon Valley types. I knew more some of the New Yorker media types like Gary. And, but the amount of support that you get from angels, super angels, or entrepreneurs is actually like 100x what it would be from a VC for a bunch of different reasons. It's why if you ever do get things like this together, you should never invite an investor. You can invite the little investors that put in 25K, right? If they're an entrepreneur, but you should never invite your lead investor into it.
No.
Because your lead investor, as much as they never want to admit it, is a fair weather friend in almost all circumstances, you know? So it's got to be pure. And Joe, I don't know if this resonates with you, but it's like, it's got to be pure and it's got to feel like people can actually talk, which means there needs to be nobody there that anyone kind of needs to impress or something.
Yeah. You can't be spinning for somebody in this meeting. And a VC, like, they have a job. Like, I'm friends with lots of VCs, but I also understand like their job is, they have a job to do. And like, sometimes that means not doing a bridge round or whatever it is.
Totally.
That's right.
And you're like, well, you're my friend. Well, I thought this was, it's like, that's not how it works. It took a long time to learn that. And, but yeah, it's a different thing for sure.
Very interesting. I'm just thinking about, go ahead.
But I'm curious, this is related. Guessing you guys get this too. Like, you're up and coming entrepreneurs and they're like, I really want that group. I want to make you an advisor and give you shares to be my kind of mentor and kind of connection.
Right.
That also feels very different.
Yes.
That is. Do you do it, Joe?
What would you say the differences are?
Well, I actually pretty much don't advise.
Ever.
Same with me.
I feel like I got almost taken advantage of by advisors in the early days of Klout. I was so hungry for credibility and having people with names that would kind of, I could put on a slide and associate to the company that it was a real bummer when the company got acquired and it was, a good outcome. And I'm looking at like the, who gets what. And I had these advisors who literally did nothing, make more than some of our like engineers that have been there for years and built critical things. So it wasn't like they were trying to play me, but it was like, I did not feel like it was a good use. I felt like I felt taken advantage of or kind of just dumb. And so when I meet young entrepreneurs, I almost, unless there's somebody that has worked in my company, like I will never be an advisor. I'll help them in every way I can, but I don't have equity.
This resonates with me a lot. Okay. The inverse is so true. And I don't know if this resonates with all y'all, but I definitely have entrepreneurs that have repeatedly reached out to me to book calls. They're booking calls over and over and over again. I'm giving them suggestions of things that I know are valuable and that they execute on in some cases, but then no advisor agreement ever comes into play. And now I feel like I'm being played.
Interesting.
Right. And so it's there. And I find that really frustrating because it's really obvious. Like if you just raw in cash, just talk about my value. One of my calls with one of my coaches, my coaching clients is $750, just to give you a sense. That's today. And I'm undercharging.
You are undercharging.
Right. And I know I am. And does it need to be valued at that in cash? Certainly not. And recently, an exception to my advisor thing came in play where someone I do want as an advisor actually in this business, because I agree with you, Joe. I was desperate for credibility. Any rando that wanted to be involved, I was like, advisor, press the advisor button as soon as you can. The other version of it, which I don't remember if I spoke to exactly on the show, is that I used a thing called Clarity in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
And I would call the most expensive people that I could find, like $6, $10 a minute, because I had no network. And I would call them because I know that they were on the network. Like they would pay. Dan Martell is the guy who started this company and eventually sold it.
One of my subletters in that office I was mentioning.
Oh, is that true? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So he started that, and I would call people for $500 a fucking hour, be like, teach me how to fundraise. And so you can do this. And I did do it till I eventually got my own skill set, I think.
I have an opinion on both sides. So on Joe's side, there actually are, and I know for sure, there are predatory advisors, especially in Silicon Valley. They will go to like upcoming potentially great companies, and they will actually ask for advisor shares, and they will actually ask for quite a bit. So like early days, like I've seen like half a point even given to like some like advisors, and there's also no agreement on like what is going to actually take place. Like, is it going to be a certain amount of hours per month that you're going to advise? Like, are you going to help us get our first 3 engineers? Like, what is this going to do? And I've seen people get rich. Like, I actually know somebody that was one of the very first engineering advisors to Uber. And he literally, that's how he made all of his money. He was also a founder and an investor, and he made all of his money just off of that. And there's so many other people that are very predatory to take advantage of, especially first-time founders. In Uber's case, it wasn't a first-time founder. And I think he did deliver some value to the company as well. But I've seen it in so many other companies that they'll try to just take as much, and just they really don't give anything at all.
Yeah.
For myself, I do I have a few advisors in the company, but it was very it was like, okay, I need before myself, I have an engineering background, but like I'm so outdated, I could not, there's no way I could actually screen an actual good first few engineers. So I was basically like one of my really good friends. I was like, he's awesome. And I was like, can you be an advisor and basically help us hire some engineers, and you run all the whole process, and here's equity. And I was very this is what you're going to get. On the other side, there are the people that I think like Julian. So I'm actually doing this with somebody who's just been so helpful to me. I'm just like, you've been helpful. You haven't asked for anything, and I'm going to just give you a bunch of advisor shares. So I think that's the way that I look at it right now. But you do, as a first-time founder, there are going to be people, and they will ask for a lot of money. But also, nobody gives a shit. The investors, when you put the advisors on your deck, nobody cares about that. That does not at all. That's not a good signal or anything like that. You're just giving away a piece of your company. You've convinced somebody to give them some equity. You know that they didn't put any money in the company. Potentially, there's no signal there. There's really nothing there. So but I understand that need that you want to be affiliated with some successful people, especially if you don't know anybody. But that's definitely not the right way to go. I've never done the calling thing with people. That definitely sounds really interesting. Julian, did you learn a lot from those calls? That's great.
I think it was unilaterally responsible for my Series A, probably.
At Breather, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't like a super hot A, but I got it done.
Right.
And I called Peter Pham, who I think probably everybody knows is a guy who started Science Incorporated. Joe, you probably know him. And there's a bunch of other people, tons of people that I called, $50 a minute, whatever. I just kept calling them, because when you raise, it was 6 million was that round. Oh, sorry, but I'd done it before. So I had $1.5 million was the last round, very, very early. But I was so under networked and I was so underinformed on how to do a financing
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. How does this work? So I would call people for stupid things like, okay, I just did a second meeting with the second partner at a fund. He said this and this. What do I do? And I would do a 15-minute call with them. And I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And by the, for those of you that have, that know about Breather or had seen the history of it, it ended up raising around $150 million. And so like that was a skill set that I paid to learn literally.
That paid off.
That paid off. Bouche à oreille, as how you say it in French, ear, mouth to ear, verbally, they taught me how to fundraise because I had nothing,
Right.
I wonder how people do it now.
The current version of Clarity is Intro. Have you guys seen this?
Yes, I've
seen
heard of that. Yeah.
Actually done calls on that as people paying me.
I'm getting it for free. I can't believe it.
Yeah. And it's been great. And the entrepreneurs I've met have been awesome. And it's cool seeing so often they are under networked in the sense they're from a random city somewhere and they don't have the access to the entrepreneur scene that we've been fortunate to crack into.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys want to pivot? Not I think on the building relationships, but how about building relationships and networks with investors?
Yeah.
How have you guys done that?
It's first of all, it's tough. Joe, you and I Kevin, you were an outsider, but you moved to Silicon Valley. So if with your permission, I would say you were less of an outsider than me and Joe were probably. Would you say that's right, Joe? Or
I mean, I definitely felt like an outsider with Klout. I had never, when Klout had launched, I had never met an investor. Like, I had never met a person who worked at Google. A janitor from Google was like beyond my network,
That's right.
Like I had, it was totally outside the world.
Mm-hmm. And it's that you built it by yourself. You were like a solo engineer that was just building a version of it or something.
Yeah, I built the first version of Klout and just was like, this is the thing that now exists in the world.
Yeah.
Who wants to try it?
I remember grappling with, so first of all, my network, it's important. I give people advice all the time during this type of conversation. And I'm like raised with no data, right? This is the thing that I tell people when they start, because the moment you have a single point of data, someone will use it against you, right?
Yeah.
And and we're talking about a seed round or whatever they call it. And so that is what I did at Breather. If I had any numbers, no one would have believed in it. And I pitched a concept, and I was fortunate that I had a set of well-known speakers who are today sometimes in the Speakers Hall of Fame, like quite successful people, including Gary, including a dude, Jay Bear, who's in the Speakers Hall of Fame, and a bunch of other people. They were ready to give me early things because of a blog that I'd written that was successful and so on. And it included Mike Walsh, who was one of the first investors in Uber, who just gave me $100K in 5 minutes. Right. And it's just like you have these, you're like, oh my God. In retrospect, I was under networked because I got no VCs. There were no VCs that I could speak to. I didn't know how to talk to them. And none of them responded and none of them gave me time wait, except for First Round Capital, who almost got to a term sheet now that I think back about it. And they were willing to meet with me, but not a lot of people. And, in retrospect, I would now be able to say that investors' job is to meet with you and to deploy capital. So I would just say, meet with anyone, no matter A, B, C, D, F fund, meet them.
Yep.
Cares, come highly prepared, but not so rehearsed that you end up robotic, and just develop an emotional relationship of some kind. That would be what I would say, because it's their job to fucking meet you, And I wish I had done that, I suppose. I didn't do that as well as I could have.
Yeah, I don't think you really understand, like, as a first-time founder, what the job of actual VC is, right?
No.
You just think that they're there to say yes or no. but their
Mhm.
job is to source, is to cultivate relationships so they can have access to the best and hottest deals. It's also to like gather like information about companies, and if they want to actually write a term sheet, they have to then convince their partners of it as well.
Mhm.
And so like that is their job, and they do get paid a salary, right? Like
Yep.
typically of a venture fund, the 2% are management fees. They get a salary even
Mhm.
if the companies they invest in don't return anything to the fund.
Yep.
And so they do have a day-to-day job. So
Mhm.
that you should understand how that works. How I did it was very I did have a very small company in Canada before I had Shyp that I started in San Francisco. And so I did have some VC meetings, some like in Vancouver and then Montreal, and those VCs. This is a long time ago, but they were very subpar. And I'm sure that's
Don't act
changed.
like you're so embarrassed about it, dude.
I'm not embarrassed of it. So I'm sure they're better than they are then, but coming down to San Francisco is just a completely different ball game. But I think you need to do everything you can. Yeah, meet with anybody you can for whatever reason. I think so my second time around, I took the approach of like trying to cultivate a relationship, knowing that I'm going to have to ask for capital. So
Yeah.
I would go, and it wouldn't be a pitch, right? It'd be like, oh, like I met you last time with Shyp and I actually pitched you, but like here's a new thing I'm working on. I just want to share it
Mhm.
with you.
Yeah.
Um, I did that a lot. I also like the way I structured my round at Airhouse, I did not take any firms as like investors. It was all like, oh, it'd be like a seed. Like I took a seed fund, but it would not be multi-stage because I was
Got it.
worried about the
You
signaling
signal.
risk. Yeah. So
Okay.
like a
Yeah.
signaling risk is that if you take a fund, so say you take Andreessen Horowitz, for example,
Mhm.
right? Like they could write hundreds of millions of dollars. So if they go on your seed, they're going to see all the data. And
Mhm.
what if they don't write your A? That's could
Yep.
be a negative signal to other investors.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that was my thought process on that. And I don't know if that's right or not, but I decided not to go with those investors, but
Mhm.
instead I would basically meet with all of the major firms and be like, hey, I'm working on this thing in order to build relationships. And I think probably, I think like the one thing I didn't account for, which is really interesting, is that people move around a lot and people get out of venture and I thought I was like
Yeah.
developing these relationships. And it's like, oh, when we're ready to raise our B, like I've updated you on the stage of company that we're at. And like, I did exactly what we did. And like,
Mhm.
here, you should be writing them a check. That's what I kind of thought, even going around it for the second time. That actually didn't turn out to be true. There's so many people that move around and stuff like that, but I think
Mhm.
it's important to just meet with a lot of VCs, develop a good network, but also know that it may not be that same VC. They also have every VC has a CRM. Every single time that you meet with them,
Mhm.
they record it, right? They record that they've met with you, and I don't know how detailed their notes are. I've never been on that side of the table, but just to even understand like what's really important to VCs, spend a lot of time with them. What is their process like? What kind of companies are they interested in? I think certain funds will like chase different hype cycles,
Yeah.
probably more than will. Others will kind of have
Mhm.
different strategies. So like just getting in and just trying to build your network as much as you possibly can. I don't think of the like there's also a lot of VCs will be like, you should get like lunch with me like every single quarter and update me on my progress. I think that's
Yeah.
bullshit. I'm like,
Yeah.
we don't have time to do that with 20 or 30 VCs. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
ridiculous. That's you wanting an entrepreneur to like give the info to you first. And so I
Mhm.
see this all the
Yes.
time on Twitter. It's like you should be
Yeah.
updating people and sending me notes on like your progress and all of that. It's like, no, I shouldn't. Like, you're just wanting to do that because you want to be the front runner of all these other VCs.
Yeah.
It's a game. So anyways, that has been my strategy to
Mhm.
date. And it didn't work out as well as I thought. I thought that I'd be able to go like for
Mhm.
my B, and it's like, I've told you exactly what I'm gonna do from the seed stage on,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's ready.
Mhm.
That it has not turned out to be true, but
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
still now do have a really good, I'd say, like investor network. Like we're looking to raise our next round. And probably 75% of the people that we'll be talking to are from relationships that I've made versus getting intros from other founders or from your other VCs. So I think it's worked pretty well for me so far.
Joe, did you find that between your prior company, your first company, venture-backed company, Klout, and that network that you had built throughout Klout, which must have been meaningful, did you find that network built over time, like how would you rate the improvement from like a to an F or something?
Yeah, I think it grew a ton, obviously, like from literally never meeting a VC to feeling like I knew. Yeah, you just end up pitching every firm and you bump into these people year after year. And mostly, most VCs, they're intellectually curious people. Like it's easy to have good conversations and like kind of build a light friendship.
That's true.
And again, their job is
light's
to
important. Light is important.
Yes.
It's a very important word. Yeah.
Can we double click just quickly just on that, Joe? Explain that phrase because I think it's valuable for everybody to know.
Yeah, like I think of it as you're more than acquaintances. You'll see each other at all the same events and, keep up and you're friends on social and all these things. And, you tend to get like similar interests, like, oh, you're skiing, I'm skiing, blah, blah, blah. Like, and you find, and they're kind of grow up together. Like there's a lot of VCs that were like, why we connected was I was like, that person's as hungry as I am. We're going to do 50 deals together over the course of our lives. And like, you see them grow and they start having kids and you're having kids and you're staying close. And like, they're not your like, it's not the founder homies or, support group that are going to like pick you up when you're wiped out, but it's also not a random person. Like,
it's
you're in
not,
orbit
it is
around each other for sure.
Yeah. You're in the same space and actually tech is way smaller. We think of it as big these days and it is bigger, but everybody still to a degree knows one another, right? Like it would be easy for us to get to even, I don't want to say have a big meeting with, but if we want to get even to like Elon Musk, like we probably could, right? Like, and so
at least as people,
as people, to be clear, he would absolutely reject us, but that's how small tech is what I'm trying to express. And so you were talking about building those life friendships, and time really does allow for an amount of trust to build just by being in the same space, sort of. I know about you, et cetera. Andrew Chen is a great example. I don't know if it applies to you, Joe, but Andrew and I met before Breather, before he was at Andreessen Horowitz. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. And it was my first venture-backed company. And we talked about it. And he really wasn't an investor then, but we just met casually. He was a blogger and so was I. And we go for 7 years and he finds out ultimately about Breather and how it went and et cetera, the progress. And then he's like, oh, you made this new thing? He's like, I'm in. Boom, 2 days, term sheet. Right. So a part of that is this privilege of network and the privilege of being in the same social circles, which obviously is not a given. Not everybody has that. And some people are born with it. I wasn't on the bottom in terms of network, but nor was I really at the top. And, but then all of a sudden you're in the inner circles. That's why, Adam Nash, who we had on, is like a lifelong Silicon Valley dude. I say this with respect, like could get funded for any random thing that he probably wanted because he has these 25-year relationships with other people.
I'd say that like the Adam Nash type, those are like the top networkers as far as probably founders and also investors. Like just his network, I could not it's probably just unbelievable.
Yeah. But I mean, you develop it by it's one of the few industries where kind of like busting your ass like works. You can't be a fucking idiot.
Yes.
Right? But you just bust your ass. You're like, oh yeah, I saw him do that thing. Here's the view from the outside. From the outside, says the investors, I saw him do that thing. I didn't really believe in that thing. I couldn't do it. I saw him do this other thing. He was smarter about it this time. And then I've seen him do this, and this is really good. You know what? I'm in.
Right.
Fuck it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I mean, you could literally tweet yourself into the consciousness the investor set.
Yeah.
Like,
There's no doubt about
it
it.
happened,
Yeah.
you know? Like,
Mhm.
it's really cool seeing these young entrepreneurs build their audience on Twitter and kind of get into they're in the conversations, and they're making their network, and most of the time they aren't in Silicon Valley, and they, maybe they end
Yep.
up there, or they end up in New York or LA or whatever, but like, it's cool that from anywhere you can work your way in if you hustle hard enough at it.
Yeah.
Joe, how did it feel to get called out? Get queried about Klout, which was 2008 and 2023 publishing this, and people are talking about Klout on Twitter. You remember I tagged you this week. It's like everybody still knows you from them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, it's a mix where it's like really proud of the work we did. It
Mhm.
was, obviously the center point of my life for a very long time. And it's like also motivating to try to like top that, like not
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
go.
Of course.
So it is cool that it still exists in the consciousness. And every day I get tagged on tweets of like, why isn't there a new Klout? Or why, can we build a new
Yep.
Klout? And it's a fun conversation. It's also been long enough that I feel more comfortable revisiting it. For a long time, it was like
Right.
talking about
Man, I
like an
hear you.
ex-girlfriend or
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I hear you. And so, Kevin,
Now it's just
do
like
you
joy.
do you get grabbed and be like, hey, I'm doing a new version of this? Like, will a new version of Shyp, does that ever like cross your inbox in any way, or?
All the time. And
Okay.
yeah. A lot of people want to know why it didn't work out, and specifically around like returns. There's actually DoorDash actually came out with like a similar like returns product that, to be clear, will fail, but but
Okay.
they're trying it anyways, because I lived it. It was interesting that they actually didn't reach out to me, but yeah, I always get tagged in things. It's like, oh, I wish Shyp still existed and stuff like that. It was an amazing product, and it's real. At first, it's the exact same thing that Joe mentioned. Joe, you had a success. For me, it was like an utter like failure. So for me, it was very like early on. I just wanted to like move on with my life and like not even really talk about it at all. But now I'm definitely much more open to like revisiting that and like looking back and be like, wow, it was a really awesome product, and like I'll talk to it, but obviously I would still much rather focus on what I'm building now. But it is really interesting. I think that brings up another thing that we kind of touched on here, but like building your network on Twitter. I think that is like,
Man.
that's a real skill. I'd say I'm like decent at it, but my follower score is not close to your guys's or other people out there. That is a real, like, you could build your career on it almost.
So I'll give you the bit that I think is the most helpful for me as a CEO to doing this. I haven't actively done it in a long time because I went through this phase in early influencers where it's like I realized I was on a content treadmill, and I really didn't like being on the content treadmill, but I had also had nobody to delegate to at that time. We're talking very early influencer social media days where Joe was building and I was inside his machine, to be clear. And so what I do today that I think is effective, and what I think most people do that are doing it at scale, because I know a whole bunch of them, is they do a version of this. I call a person on my marketing team and I go, tweet thread. And they go, okay. And I go, here it is, blah, blah, blah. They're like, okay. And then what? I'm like, and then blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay. And now what? And I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And I verbalize it to them. And it's one of the things about this podcast that's useful is that it allows us to bounce off of one another and off a guest, things that we do know, because we have a ton of learnings from the suffering that we've all been through in the 3 decades collectively plus on this panel, right?
Totally.
But it doesn't emerge.
No, it doesn't. No. And that's why I love doing this so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because it comes off and it bounces off one another because of the discussion. And so similarly, Twitter needs to do that with you, but you need to do it off of, I found that I need to do it off of somebody else. And so I would call someone on my marketing team. I'd be like, tweet thread. And they're like, okay. And then I just run them through it, and then they write it, and then we publish it. And that to me is the means to do it. And I can get a little bit into more detail about this. Like there are people that I know that are like, yeah, if it doesn't get 2 likes for each minute that it's on, I delete it, for example. Right? Like there's ratios like that where people are like, that's when I could tell something is really gonna fly off the shelf. And that's when I keep it, because if I keep all my other random tweets and people they see a set of tweets in a timeline that are not highly engaging. And so I delete those if they don't work out. But when they do work out, then boom, you could see right in the first minute that they're starting to fly off the shelf. And they turn it into a machine, and they do it in order to get clients, right? Different type of business, but they do it in order to get clients. Here, we're talking about it probably to do it with investors, which I think is also very doable. And there are, as you know, there are firms that ghostwrite as well.
Yeah.
And I met with some of them not for this reason over the past couple of weeks. And there's firms that ghostwrite that will gladly charge you $10K to become a VC influencer on Twitter, right? So it's all out there.
I think it's amazing to see, like, I've seen some people that have went from like nobodies to like having like 250 to 500,000 followers. And then they start monetizing on that, whether it's like they have a podcast and sponsors, or they have a book, or it's usually like self-help. There's a lot of self-help stuff. And then they have TikToks and like all this shit.
Yep.
But it's amazing to see that you can create such a big following so drastically. I think like the smart people, especially given like Twitter's got so many different like circles in it, would just be try to try to insert yourself into whatever industry you're in as much as you possibly can, and just try to gain some clout from doing that. And it could be in just a thread, and like for me right now, like I see a lot of people like in the warehousing 3PL space, and there's like those types of influencers, and that's a thing, and you guys probably didn't know about that.
Nope.
But I'd say that's like a pretty smart strategy to kind of get into like the kind of conversation about whatever topic that you're building in or whatever. And it could be both for it could be for everything. It could be for getting customers. It could be for attracting talent. It could be for also investors. I think there's just so many different circles within Twitter and also within tech in general that it could be used for a number of different things.
Joe, it's already starting. FYI, an investor called me last month and said, hey, maybe we could fly Kevin up and we could do a podcast in person. This really happened. And I said, I'll ask him. And I did ask Kevin offline, and he said, no, I'm fundraising. I can't come to Canada. It was a Canadian venture capitalist. But the point is we're already influencers. We would have very high Klout scores.
For the record, I'll fly to Canada as an influencer. I'm not Canadian, so I don't.
Find it here first.
But I'm willing. I will cash those influencer checks.
As a closing thought, who is the person, looking back on it now, and I realize it's sort of off the cuff, but try to think it through quickly, that was the most influential person that you ever connected to, randomly, that was the most helpful to you? Who was the person that you connected to that was the most helpful, kind of like out of nowhere?
I know for sure.
Go for it.
It was Naval.
It was Naval.
And this is when I was first starting Shyp. And here's also a good trick as well for people. He was on TechCrunch Disrupt, and he basically like this was when Uber for everything was starting, and they were talking about shipping, and I was already like ideating and starting to create Shyp,
Mhm.
and I just cold emailed him, and he's like, this is a great idea. Come on into the AngelList office, because they were starting to do syndicates and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And he basically, like, I did not have a network at all before him. And he introduced me to Tim Ferriss, and then we turned into one of the largest we were one of the first and largest AngelList syndicates, and it was all through Naval. And actually carrying that through, I would say he has been the most supportive throughout even the downturn of Shyp as we were trying to raise more money. And
Yeah.
then even he came into Airhouse as well. And he's
Mhm.
definitely at a much higher caliber now. Like I don't have as much access to him today than I did early on,
Mhm.
because he's just doing so many more things. Like he's on Joe Rogan, like he's in that level of like I guess tech celebrity Pete. But I can still get a hold of it. If I message him right now, he'd probably call me back in a day or something like that. But
Mhm.
he definitely early on was the most helpful, most influential person, and that also just kind of got me going. It's like, oh, I could write a cold email to somebody, and like
Yeah.
this could happen. Like anything's possible. Like you just gotta try a bunch of things, and that's what I loved also about just Silicon Valley. And now it's more of a before it was just a place. It was only in Silicon Valley this happened. Now it's more of just like a um just I don't know what you call it. Uh so just kind of a way of living and building. So you can do it anywhere. But there's so many people out there that are helpful. And I've now since then had at different times, different people that have been really helpful. And it could be their life stages as well. So it's like, oh, they wrote a super small angel check, but
Mhm.
they're trying to get into VC. So they want to make a ton of intros. So they'll make like 25 intros to people or
Mhm.
something like that. I've seen that a few times throughout my career so far.
Joe, what about you?
So I met a guy named Alan Morgan in the really early days of Klout. He had formerly been a lawyer and then was a partner at Mayfield, the
Mm.
venture fund, and
Yep.
effectively was kind of rolling out of Mayfield at the time, was retiring. Um, and he was just like amazing. Like he probably introduced me to more investors and more people than kind of anyone. He was so helpful. I then asked him to sit in an independent seat on my board, took a million
Mm.
bullets for me at different times. Like, uh, it was like a definitely kind of like trajectory changing relationship.
It's I have a Naval story as well. I would just say he really, I think he basically made that seed round happen a breather that
Wow,
otherwise would have been
really?
30% smaller. I
He's amazing.
walked into the AngelList office. At the time, this was like really apocryphal, but a dude, Alex Payne, was my CTO. Long story about that, which we won't get into in the podcast. But and I went in, and Naval didn't know me at all. And he said, okay, well, Alex knows you. And he said, okay, so, I'll feature you right now. And he just put my company in, and boom, he just featured me on AngelList, like right that moment.
Right.
And I was coming out, and I said, if I don't raise $1.5 million, I'm just going to shut this down. And, I got that 365 or 400K from AngelList. And that's what got me over my thing to get my company started. And then I'll
Wow.
also shout out angels. The smaller the check, probably the more valuable,
Yep.
because as soon as they hit a certain threshold, I'm actually having a bit of a grind at the moment where I'm noting that super cool angel investors that are like super cool on Twitter, et cetera, don't always provide super high value.
No, they don't.
But I'll do a shout out to Emily Kramer, who runs a syndicate, and she was the VP of marketing at Carta and the the director of marketing at Asana, I think. And it's just like, you have a set of people that are just super high value. They'll always respond to you. They'll always be willing to talk to you. And then you have a set of people that are kind of fair weather to a degree, where they're like, yeah, you're so hot, Andreessen Horowitz. And then like 6 months later, they don't respond to email.
But
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we could end on this. But I'll also, what I've noticed is that it goes in waves. So like Naval is not going to be the same person that he was when me and you, when we started at similar times, Julian, our last companies. Like he just can't be that as helpful to young entrepreneurs. But there'll be another type of person like a Naval, and it just goes through these different cycles. And so it just takes time to find those people, but they're going to be one out of 20, one out of 30 people that you meet that are just going to be these super helpful people. So I think it's really like the amount, like for all of this, like it's the amount of shots on goal you really take. So whether that's like trying to meet people, to develop like founder relationships with, investor relationships with, employee relationships with, like customer relationship, all of these things. It's just, you just need to put yourself out there, and then you kind of luck just happens to come on you. That's what I kind of live by.
I just realized Sarah Kathleen Peck had me in her apartment in a spare room. They put a bed in there, and it was up in, not in the Tenderloin, but above the Tenderloin, like Nob Hill or something. And she just left me in that bedroom, and I stayed there for 3 months, and every day I did meetings in San Francisco.
That's amazing.
And so like, it's just random people that were just like, yeah, absolutely. You can sleep in my bedroom while you fundraise, or not in my bedroom.
Right.
It's a side bedroom. And so that's how you get it done, I guess.
I think it's a good way to end.
Great chatting with you guys.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully you learned something.
See you next time.
If you can, like the podcast, whenever you're listening to, we need to do a better job of actually promoting this thing.
We do.
We have a pretty good solid following now, but as much as you could share this and like this and the YouTube algorithm, all that stuff, we very, very respected. We have no sponsors, and I don't think ever will. So we just do this because we love it.
Oh man.
So
Andy's not here to say Val's our sponsor.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right. Val's never paid us anything. So thanks everyone. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, we keep it real and we bring you the facts. It's the Second Time Founders podcast. Talking tech news, the show is a must. Not some billionaire trying to sell you their book. We're coming from a real place, plenty ups and downs. Got some insights, join the discussion now. We being honest and raw, giving you real talk. We've been at the bottom and made it happen and much more. The Second Time Founders podcast. More building, less talk.